purpose of the meeting tonight is to talk to you about the 2021 Tactical Basin Plan for the Lamoille River. I'm going to give you an overview of the basin if you're not familiar with it. I'm going to talk to you about the Tactical Basin planning process, the accomplishments we've made in the past 5 years since the 2016 plan, our restoration and protection priorities for the basin, and then how to become involved in watershed work and how to submit comments. I will provide the opportunity for folks to ask questions specific to the plan. And also, if anybody wants to submit a formal comment to the plan, we'll discuss how to do that as well. So some ground rules. Be sure to keep muted if you're not talking, and Peter will be checking on that. Be respectful of other people's ideas and situations when they're talking. Please share your unique perspective. It's really helpful for me to understand where people are coming from. If you have any disagreements or concerns, just please share them respectfully, speak honestly. I promise you won't hurt my feelings, at least not too bad. Everyone can participate in this. And one speaker at a time, which I think is one of the hardest things to do at these meetings where we have a lot of folks online, because you never know who's going to talk. And then I just want to make sure when we're doing our question and answer session, that we stay on topic, because the basin plans, there's so much going on. It's easy to get off into the weeds about things. So I think the public meeting is a great time to ask clarifying questions. And while formal comment is an option, I think email is the best way to ensure your formal comment is recorded and addressed well. And formal comments won't be addressed during this meeting, but they are addressed in a responsiveness summary in the final plan. So that's how that works. So if you just have general comments or questions, you can just let us know, and that's stuff I can address today. Alec will be tracking time. So we just want to make sure that we're staying on time and we're respecting your time as well. So be specific and brief with any questions you have and allow time for others to comment. And depending on the length of the discussion, if we can't get to all the questions, you can definitely reach out to me by email or via phone after the meeting. I'm more than happy to talk. All right. So here we go. So like I said, there is a more detailed story map that looks just like this that you can access on our website. And something that you will see is you'll see these little buttons here. They're blue buttons, and they have descriptive information. In this case, it says 2021 Draft Lamoille Basin Plan. So when you're using those in the story map, at home, you can click on those and those will open to different sections of the plan. So let's start out with the basics. What is a basin? A basin is an area of land that's drained by a river and its tributaries. The term basin and watershed is used interchangeably in the story map and during this talk. And the Lamoille River watershed is also referred to as Basin 7. So what is a tactical basin plan? I'm assuming a lot of you probably know already, but I'll help refresh you. It provides a comprehensive view of the health of the watershed. In this case, I'm providing the information for all the land and waters that drain the Lamoille River where it meets Lake Champlain at Mallett's Bay. The plans identify waters that exceed the basic level of support or do not support designated uses in the water quality standards. Those designated uses include support for aquatic organisms and wildlife like amphibians and fish and the food they eat, habitat support for that biota wildlife and plant life, fishing, swimming, boating, aesthetic enjoyment, and public water source support. Here's our tactical basin plan, 5 steps to the tactical basin planning. So we use information collected by the state, watershed partners, municipalities, and volunteers through water quality monitoring and assessment of rivers, lakes, and wetlands. So we take the monitoring and assessment data, we talk with all our different partners, we figure out what the main priorities are, we work with them to develop strategies, we put together the plan, and then we put it out for our final comment like we're doing now. We finalize it, and then ongoing. during those 5 years, we're implementing and tracking those projects. So that's always ongoing throughout the process. We do this on 5-year cycles, with each cycle looking back at past information to assess how we are progressing and identify new areas to research. So how do we get it done? We collaborate. That's how we do things for basin planning. Basin planners collaborate with state, federal, and local partners and stakeholders to improve water quality throughout the state. This collaboration is crucial to the health of our waters. So just in this photo right here, you see representatives from the town of Walcott, a scientist from the Rivers Program, another scientist from Fish and Wildlife, representatives from the Lamoille County Regional Planning Commission, a representative from the Vermont Land Trust. So and then the consultants that are working on the project. So this is the norm for us. We're always collaborating. We also work with the Agency of Farm and Markets, the Agency of Transportation, and then all our partners within ANR, the Agency of Natural Resources, our conservation districts, our regional planning commissions, our local watershed groups, and our municipalities. So why should you care? Maybe I don't need to even cover this because you're here at this meeting, so I assume you do care. But water quality matters. We're mostly made up of water, we depend on water for our survival. But why should we care about basin plans? There are a lot of reasons. I think first and foremost is that we give you 5-year updates on the quality of the waters where you live and recreate, and we provide a list of strategies to protect and restore your local waters. Knowing and addressing water quality issues in your watershed will protect your community and your family in the near and especially in the long term. We really like to look at things from the long term because these systems have been around so long and they take a long time to react to the things that we do, whether good or bad. Well, there's also this other part about planning that's important, and that's the funding, right? So if you are identified in a tactical basin plan, that can help you to apply for funding to get the funds you need to complete the strategies in the plan. And this can be state funding, it can be federal funding or nonprofit funding, wherever you happen to be looking for funding. But specifically for the state, this helps set priorities for state funding. Between 2016 and 2020, a total of over $11 million was awarded in Basin 7 for clean water projects. The majority of that funding went to agriculture, developed lands, and natural resource projects that were all implemented within the basin. And some of these projects will be highlighted here, so I'll be talking about them tonight. So working together, we really try to be most cost effective with our clean water solutions so we can get the biggest bang for our buck. But we also go where people are willing and interested to do those projects. And this graphic that you're seeing right now was taken out of the Vermont Clean Water Initiative Performance Report, and this is put out annually. So this report reports on the funding and then the progress and even nutrient reductions as well. So let's talk about Basin 7, why we're here. So Basin 7, also called the Lamoille River Watershed for most people, right? Covers approximately 706 square miles and accounts for 7.5% of Vermont's land area. It's pretty big. It occupies a major part of Lamoille County and lesser parts of Franklin, Chittenden, Orleans, Washington, and Caledonia counties. And that's why we have so many partners in this watershed, because of all the different areas it spans. The entire watershed includes 35 towns. So if we look at Basin 7 from a smaller sub-watershed level, so all those little black squiggly lines you see there, break it down into these smaller watersheds. This helps us to parse out patterns that aren't observable on a larger basin-wide scale when looking at specific issues within a section of a river, a lake, or a wetland. So if we know there's something going on with the river, we look at the watershed of that river. All waters in each of the sub-watersheds flow towards Lake Champlain. So you can see anything that you do up high in the watershed can impact folks lower down in the watershed. Rivers. I'm going to guess that nobody probably knows what this river is, but I want you to guess maybe silently to yourself. I definitely wouldn't be able to guess this one, but I'll let you know what it is after I talk a little bit about rivers. So Lamoille River begins its 85-mile journey in Greensboro, and it terminates at its confluence with Lake Champlain in Milton and Colchester. The basin comprises a number of larger rivers, so the Browns River, the Wild Branch, the North Branch, the Guion, the Brewster River, the Seymour River, Mill Brook, and other smaller Lamoille tributaries. I'm sorry if I didn't mention your favorite river. So the river you're looking at right now is Bunker Brook, and this is in Hardwick, and it goes right under Route 15. So all of you have probably driven over it at some time. Lakes. There are 38 lakes and ponds in Basin 7 that are 10 acres or greater. Of the 8 lakes in Basin 7 over 130 acres, all but one of them, Lake Elmore, have dams that are managed by hydroelectric facilities. So these water bodies include Caspian Lake, Arrowhead Mountain Lake, Green River Reservoir, Lake Elmore, Lake Eden, East Long Pond, Nichols Pond, and Lake Lamoille. Arrowhead Mountain Lake and Lake Lamoille are both impounded water bodies on the Lamoille River that generate hydropower and have mixed characteristics of a river and lake. So the amount of water that's in them recharges more often than would a regular lake. So you may see more sedimentation in those types of water bodies. And any of you who are familiar with either of those water bodies can probably understand that. And I'm sure most of you know where this photo was taken. This is Lake Elmore State Park. It's a swimming area, very popular place. A Lake Watershed Action Plan was completed on Lake Elmore in 2021 by the Lake Elmore Association and the Lamoille County Conservation District. And last but certainly not least are wetlands. So wetlands is really where my heart lies. The picture you're looking at right now is from the Sandbar Wetland Complex. This is the only Class 1 designated wetland in the Lamoille Watershed. It was designated in 2016, and it's at the confluence of the Lamoille River and Lake Champlain in Milton and Colchester. It houses a variety of wetland types: floodplain forests, emergent marshes, vernal pools, shrub wetlands persist throughout the complex. And it also provides habitat for 29 rare, threatened, and endangered species that have been documented in the complex, and that includes both wildlife and plants. So it's a very special place. And it also serves important functions that help to store and filter water before entering Lake Champlain, and also provides erosion protection by slowing down erosive forces of the lake. And another trivia fact, that this wetland complex hosts the oldest wildlife management area in the state. And the photo here is Round Pond Marsh at the Sandbar Wetland Complex. So what have we accomplished since the 2016 plan? So we had 88 strategies in that plan. And we've had help, like I said, from all these organizations, all these watershed partners, and we've really accomplished a lot. We've completed 27 of those 88, 21 of them are in progress, 17 are ongoing. So ongoing actions are those ones that we continue to do year after year after year. 13 are awaiting action, so those have likely been transferred to this plan, and they weren't done for various reasons. And then 10 have been discontinued because we did something else that accomplished what we needed to do, or they weren't a priority anymore. So 74% of the strategies identified in the 2016 plan are active or complete. There will be a report card for Basin 7 that provides the list of the 88 strategies, and then detailed descriptions of what's been completed for each of those strategies. So if you like the details, you really want to know what's been done, that's where you'll find it. And that will be included in the Vermont Clean Water Initiative 2021 performance report. So that was that report I talked about earlier that talks about the funding and the nutrient reductions in the basin. So let's talk about projects. I do a lot of talking about projects and strategies, And I feel like a lot of the times people are like, well, what are you actually doing? What are these projects and strategies? So let's talk about that. So what I'm showing you right now is a visual of the Clean Water Projects Explorer. And it basically shows a map of New England, and there's little buttons that you can press. And you have the ability, if you go into this tool, and maybe Peter can throw a link into the chat for it if you can find it. And one, it gives you a tutorial. So if you've never used it before, you can figure out how to use it. The other thing you can do is you can search potential projects, so those projects that haven't been necessarily completed. You can search projects that are in progress, so the ones that have been funded, and then you can also search completed projects. And for those completed projects, you can click on a report and it will tell you what's been completed. And in a lot of cases, if it's available, they'll show before and after photos of those pictures. So you can search by town, you can search by sector, meaning if you just want forest projects or rivers projects. You can also, I think you can search by keyword and basin as well. So river projects, he said hello to Peter earlier this evening. He's here in the room with me. So this is Peter, and this project was a small tributary off the Brewster River in Cambridge. And what you can't tell is that used to be quite a large gully. So it was this really small kind of tributary, but it was really deep into the ground, and it was putting lots of dirt and sediment into the Brewster River. So whenever it would rain, that hill behind Peter, it's much steeper than it looks. Water would come gushing down there, and it was just basically digging itself a deep, deep ditch, and all sorts of stuff like, you know, dirt and things were falling into that and then ending up right into the river. And so the work that Peter did was to help pull back those really steep banks that were there, and then doing a lot of plantings so that now all this stuff can take root and help to stabilize the river's new, buffer areas on either side. And so now we're working on reducing that sediment and erosion that was coming from that gully, all to help the Brewster River, which is considered a stressed water body for sediment. And then I wanted to highlight this video. We're not going to watch it. It's about 8 minutes or so, 8 or 10 minutes. And it's a video that showcases the work that's been done in Jeffersonville, Vermont, and which is a village within Cambridge. And the Lamoille Planning Commission has worked with the town to do some really great projects for flood resiliency, but they've also done stormwater projects, and they've really worked on connecting the river back to the floodplains in that area. And it's been pretty amazing, the number of projects. So it's not just one, it's a number of projects that are all working together to make that community more flood resilient. And just so you know, I am only sharing a few projects because there's just so much I could be sharing right now. So like I said, if you want more detail, you can look at the story map online on our website, or when the report card comes out, you can check it out. So for lake projects, the projects you're looking at right now came out of that Lake Elmore Watershed Action Plan that the Lamoille Conservation District worked on. And this is a shoreline planting by the Vermont Youth Conservation Corps. So they're one of the partners that helps to implement projects that we identify, especially the ones that are smaller and easier to do, and helping landowners to make the areas that they're stewarding, their homes, their yards, more conducive to good habitat and clean water. And then I'll also encourage you again to check out the story map and watch this video. It's about, I set it up so it opens right up when Peter's talking about the Lake Elmore Watershed Action Plan. And it's really great. It talks about the work that the community's done together. Because like I said, it's not just Peter doing it on his own. There's a lot of different folks, including the Lamoille County Planning Commission, the Lakes and Ponds Program for the state, the town of Eden, and then all the lakeshore owners around the lake, the town of Elmore and the lakeshore owners around Elmore. So getting into developed lands, stormwater projects. When we say stormwater projects, we're talking about projects that treat water that's running off from buildings, parking lots, roads. And if you've noticed, probably when I was a kid, I don't like to admit this, but when I would walk to the corner store, I'd see these catch basins and I was like, geez, that's a great place to throw like my candy wrapper or my gum, you know? I really had absolutely no idea that these catch basins, these grates in the road flowed to rivers and streams. Nobody told me, and I was a kid and I just didn't know. So now I know better. But basically all these systems were put in to just capture water and shoot it right to the river. And now what we've learned is that that's actually not good for the river. It increases the volume, which increases the erosive forces on the river, which causes erosion, and it can also cause damage, infrastructure damage. And we know that it also puts really nasty stuff into the river really quickly. So what we're doing now is we're developing these stormwater master plans that identify areas where we can treat stormwater. So this is an example. We have done, like how many? 9 stormwater master plans since 2016. It's pretty amazing. So in Underhill, Jericho, Fairfax, Milton, Cambridge, which is in progress, Johnson, Hyde Park, Morrisville, and Hardwick. Amazing. And over 15 projects that we identified have been are in progress or were completed. So that's pretty amazing. And this is one such project in Hardwick. So Hardwick has done 5 projects out of their stormwater master plan, and that's the partnership between the Caledonia Conservation District and the town of Hardwick. And this is an example of where that water that comes in from the roads and the catch basins all shoot into this little, like, it used to just be a ditch basically, but it was a small tributary that flowed into Cooper Brook and Hardwick, which you'll see later is one of the high quality waters for fishing in the basin. And so what this does now is it captures the sediment that comes in, it prevents the erosion of the ditch that was there before, and it doesn't make it into Cooper Brook in most cases, and then the town cleans it out. So road projects are another part of the stormwater work that we do. So if you work for a town, or you're on a select board, or you're just involved with your town in general, you've probably heard about this municipal roads general permit. And it's a way that towns can make sure that their roads meet standards so that they're not putting excessive amounts of sediment into water bodies. So the picture you're looking at here is a roundtable event that was hosted by the Department of Environmental Conservation and the Lamoille County Planning Commission. You can see Peter and I are in this picture, and a couple other folks that maybe you notice, maybe you know some of the road foremen. They all look very excited to be there with their hands crossed over their chests, but they do some really great work. And the road foreman for Johnson actually took us up to one of the sites and talked about the work he did to install this ditch. This is a really steep road. And so what was happening before is that there was no stone and the ditch was just eroding. So all the dirt was ending up in the river that's further down. And he also crowned the road so that water will come off more evenly throughout. Oh, and I want to say too that this is really amazing too. So a lot of projects have been implemented basin-wide for roads since 2016. There have been 5 equipment grants that were funded. 283 erosion prevention projects were installed, and 12 stream and culvert improvement projects were installed as well. And those are not, the culverts are not cheap, so it's pretty amazing that they're able to do all that work. So agricultural projects, sometimes those are harder to see. So this is a really neat example of creative work that the Franklin County Conservation District is doing to make sure that people know when farmers are actually doing practices, because you can't tell when you're just looking at a field that's all grown up. And so in this case, this farmer is implementing cover crops and no-till planting. And so those are some of the biggest practices that help to reduce nutrients and sediment from entering the surface waters in the Lamoille Basin. So that's a lot of the work that's been going on to reduce the amount of nutrients getting into the river and into Lake Champlain. So to give you an idea, 2,133 acres of ag land was treated by conservation practices. 2,453 estimated acres of ag land was treated through equipment with state funding, so like the no-till planters. And 9,275 acres of ag conservation practices were implemented with federal funding. So those practices implemented in 2020 resulted in at least 1 metric ton of phosphorus reduction that year. So in order for us to continue to get those reductions, the farmers have to continue to implement those. And we need to make sure that we have funding and ways to help support them to do that work. Water quality monitoring. So there's a lot of that going on in the basin as well. And I've been really excited about this because we have a volunteer monitoring program for the state for rivers. And until just a few years ago, we didn't have any volunteer monitors in the Lamoille Basin. And just this year, now we have 4 different groups that are monitoring. So what's really amazing is that the state itself has completed monitoring for 22 lakes, 43 rivers, and 8 wetlands. And you can view all this information online. All the results for this information is online. There were volunteers who did in-lake monitoring of Caspian Lake, Green River Reservoir, Lake Eden, Lake Elmore, South Pond, and Walcott Pond. And I think one of them introduced himself earlier, Stu Arnold. He does the monitoring for Caspian Lake, so thank you, Stu. Lake tributary monitoring. So this is a new thing that we're doing, and we did it at Caspian Lake, and Stu did it. And we do that through our partnership program that I was talking about. And then we've also added the Franklin County Conservation District has helped us to monitor Deer Brook, Stones Brook, and the Seymour River through that same program. So what should be protected? So I'm sharing right now a map, and on that map there's blues and greens and reds, but all those things mean something good. They mean that those water bodies are in good condition, that they go above and beyond what we expect waters to meet for the water quality standards. So we have 3 different ways that we can protect these waters that we identify as high quality. One is a reclassification of surface waters, which just basically allows that water to maintain a higher status. And if it starts to drop, it doesn't have to drop very far before red flags are raised, and we need to do some work on it. So that's one way that reclassification is protective. We have Class 1 wetland designation, and I was talking to you earlier about that for sandbar. Most wetlands have a 50-foot buffer if they're Class 2, but Class 1 wetlands have a 100-foot buffer, and you can't generally have any impact on the wetland proper unless it's for a public good. So it takes a lot more to be able to actually have an impact on those wetlands. And then there's an outstanding resource waters designation that hasn't been done in a long time. So Basin 7 has one water that meets criteria for A1 aesthetic use. That's the Caspian Lake. So that's one I want to talk to you about tonight. And there's a group that formed, I don't remember how long ago, like maybe 2 years ago. I think it was actually before the pandemic, in Greensboro called the Stewards of Greensboro. And the work they do is they really just want to make sure that the water quality stays good in their town. And one of the things that they've been discussing with the Lakes and Ponds program is if they want to reclassify Caspian Lake to A1 water. So that's a discussion that they're having right now. So if you happen to have one of these waters in your town that you'd be interested in reclassifying, you can talk to me, you can talk to your regional planning commission, and we can put you in touch with people who can talk to you about the process. Remember, just opening up the conversation isn't going to automatically make things happen. You have to have the conversation, and there's a lot of different steps that go into making it happen. So what should be restored? I'm not going to talk to you about all these waters tonight, obviously. What you see is there are a number of waters that are on our list of priority waters, and those make up waters that we consider to be stressed, which means they're meeting our water quality standards, but they're showing signs that something's going on with them. We also have waters that are altered for flow. So we have a lot of hydroelectric facilities on the Lamoille. So a lot of that white is connected to those. We only have a few for aquatic invasive species. And then we only have a few waters that are impaired. So I'm not going to talk to you about all of them. You can go into the basin plan and look at all of them and understand more about what's going on. But this one tonight we'll talk about is Deer Brook. So you're looking at a map, and it should actually have more detail in it. It doesn't. That's fine. But it's Deer Brook. It flows into the lake on the bottom, which is Arrowhead Mountain Lake. And it takes up a kind of a small portion, some of Route 7, a lot of Route 89. It's been impaired for a number of years. And so we've been doing water quality monitoring there. So we've just started doing volunteer monitoring. So we're going out there 8 to 10 times a year to monitor, and we do it all the way up and down the stream so that we can get an idea of how water quality might change in different areas. But we're also working with the Friends of Northern Lake Champlain, who got a grant this year to complete a suite of stormwater projects that should help address a gully erosion issue that goes into Deer Brook. And so this picture just shows you, this is some of the output coming from the gully. It's what you're seeing is a lighter colored water that has really fine silt and sediment that's kind of constantly flowing out of that area. It deposits into the stream and it impacts aquatic habitat. So it hasn't been able to pass for aquatic habitat in a long time. But we're hoping to change that. So one of the things I want to talk about is we have this plan embedded into the Tactical Basin Plan, and it's to help reduce phosphorus to Lake Champlain. And this stage in the game, it's the Phase 3 implementation plan, and that includes water that's in the Lamoille River watershed that flows into Mallett's Bay. So you ask, well, how do we reduce this phosphorus? We're reducing phosphorus through regulatory and non-regulatory initiatives in all sectors. So developed lands, agricultural lands, forests, streams, wetlands, lakes, and wastewater. So kind of everything we can hit. So the state bears the ultimate responsibility to ensure that the overall goals for phosphorus reduction plans are achieved. But individual permit holders, such as municipalities or individual landowners, will continue to be responsible to meet their regulatory requirements. And then the clean water service providers will be responsible for achieving non-regulatory water pollution reduction. So all those projects that you just saw, they're going to be the ones in charge. So Act 76 was initiated to create the funding and project delivery framework to ensure essential water quality projects achieve Vermont's clean water goals. It established new regional organizations called Clean Water Service Providers. They were recently named in each major watershed to identify, implement, and maintain local water quality projects. So they'll be the ones responsible now for looking at projects that meet Basin Plan goals and funding the ones that get the best bang for the buck. And the Clean Water Service Provider for Basin 7 is the Northwest Regional Planning Commission. You said hi to Dean earlier tonight. So QUISPs is what we call them to keep it simple, right? Because we're the state, we like to do a lot of acronyms. They're responsible for partnering with Basin Water Quality Councils, which have not been formed yet, to identify, implement, operate, and maintain non-regulatory projects to meet non-regulatory interim phosphorus reduction targets. So that's a big one. So one of the things they'll be responsible for is not only funding to implement those projects, but also making sure those projects that are funded with state dollars are maintained over time. And that's a big thing. So 5-year phosphorus reduction targets. The Phase 3 plan lays out estimated total phosphorus reductions for the next 5 years for each sector in Basin 7. The Department of Environmental Conservation, they will prescribe a subset of stormwater, road, river, and agricultural reductions to the QUISPs, along with funding for implementation. The implementation table that you'll find in the Tactical Basin Plan outlines sector-based strategies to achieve those targets to reduce phosphorus to Lake Champlain. And there's a focus on voluntary actions to be carried out by watershed partners and the basin's clean water service provider. And so this is really the meat of the plan. If you want to look at the plan, you can just go right down to the end of the plan, Chapter 5, and check out the implementation table. Has 63 geographically explicit strategies and also 65 monitoring priorities as well. And those are all things that we want to have done, completed, in progress in the next 5 years. So the table that you're looking at, for those of you who can see the screen, is we're looking at sector. So that is the type of land use, what our 2025 target is, and that's in kilograms per year, and that's for Basin 7. So we want to reduce, for instance, the phosphorus that's coming from stormwater, so non-road stormwater, by 701 kilograms per year. So that's per year. So that means every year by 2025, we need to be achieving that per that year, but then we need to continue to achieve that per year to reach that final target, which is in 2036. And then the last piece of this, which is pretty important, is to kind of keep us on task, right? So that the Environmental Protection Agency knows we're doing our job. And so all the steps that I just shared with you, including the inclusion of that phase 3 plan into our tactical basin plans, are part of the accountability framework that tracks implementation actions. It assesses progress and determines the need for alternative management actions to ensure that the allocations and ultimately our water quality standards are met for the Lake Champlain phosphorus total maximum daily load. And so what you see is the accountability framework and the different elements that need to be met in order for us to keep on track to meet the targets and goals that I shared with you earlier. So what are the major strategies? I'm only going to go through a few for each sector, and then you can check out the basin plan to get all the details. So our sectors are agriculture, developed land, stormwater, so that's mostly from buildings and parking lots that I talked about before. Then development lands, the runoff from roads, wastewater, and then natural resource restoration. So for agriculture, one of the big things that we're doing in the basin that's new is forming agricultural sector work groups for priority watersheds. So for instance, Stones Brook is a newly impaired watershed in the basin. And so we'll be forming a work group around that to identify what can be done in that basin to help fix the problems. And then another big priority in the plan is to continue funding programs to support water quality practices in the high priority watersheds. Because like I said, we need to keep it going year after year in order to get those reductions. So for stormwater strategies, we want to continue to provide support for people to implement the projects that were identified from our stormwater master plans and phosphorus control plans. And we also want to encourage participation in the Green Schools Block Grant. So those are for schools that have 3 acres of that surface I was talking to you about, the impervious surface that has a lot of stormwater runoff. And we're going to support them with funding and technical assistance to do that work. So for roads, our focus is to provide support for towns and contractors to attend forums, those roundtable forums and training. We want to be able to provide support for towns to implement high priority road projects that are identified in these inventories that they've been doing, and also the things that we've identified in watershed action plans and stormwater master plans. And then we also want to support training, outreach, and funding for equipment sharing programs. For wastewater, we have 2 major strategies. One is to provide technical assistance and funding to towns that are interested in exploring and implementing village wastewater systems and septic replacement. So this is something that's become, I wouldn't say popular, but people are looking into it more because they want to be able to develop their village centers. They're concerned that the septic systems that are there may not be working very well, or they want to be able to build and they can't, because they don't have the capacity. So 2 towns that are doing that work right now, exploring those options, are Walcott and Westford. And then we also want to continue to support and ensure monitoring and permit compliance for our wastewater management systems on the Lamoille River. And there are, I believe, 9 of them in Basin 7. So for rivers, we want to help to provide technical assistance to towns to implement stronger protections for surface water in their towns. And then we also, another one that kind of gets pushed to the side sometimes, is making sure that we're scoping, designing, and implementing high priority bridge and culvert replacements. These can be really costly, but they can improve aquatic organism passage, which is really important for fisheries. They can help with stream geomorphic compatibility, meaning that you won't have to be replacing that bridge or road over and over again. And they help with flood resilience as well. Our lake strategies, this is kind of exciting because we've been doing these lake watershed action plans. We've had 2 developed in the basin right now, and then we have 1 more. Lake Caspian received funding to do that with the Orleans County Conservation District. So we want to develop those plans and implement the projects that are identified. We want to maintain and build capacity for existing aquatic invasive species programs. So that's something that we have also in the state, and it helps to prevent for water bodies that don't have invasive species, but also those that do, it helps them for treatment. And then where applicable, we want to increase protections for high quality lakes through reclassification. And what you're looking at in this picture, it's Lake Elmore, and there's a bunch of different little stars everywhere, and those are all the projects that were identified through the Lake Watershed Action Plan. So for wetlands, we only have a few focuses. We want to provide outreach and technical assistance for Class 1 wetland assessment. There's 6 that were identified in the plan. And so we want to be able to support the assessment, stakeholder discussions, and petition development where there's interest. So if you have interest, if your town has interest, if you're a landowner and you have interest, reach out to me or Regional Planning Commission or your conservation district, and we can talk to you about reclassification. We also want to be increasing wetland acreage and function through restoration of wetlands, and one of our focus areas is Browns River. And last but not least are forest strategies. So Lamoille is, I think, around 76% forested. So we have a lot of forest. Most of our land is forest, and I think that's partially why, at least in the state of Vermont, we have such good water quality. And I think in order to maintain that, we really have to be good stewards of the forest. And so in this picture, you can see this is an old forest road that basically has a stream through it now. The picture next to it is actually an area where they had like a culvert and it was much undersized, and they actually retired a bunch of the roads. So the picture on the right is kind of like a restored stream area with no more culverts. So that's something that the Agency of Natural Resources, Forest Parks and Recreation is working on. They've inventoried all the state lands, and they're doing a bunch of projects, but they also work with private landowners who are under current use, who have to meet the acceptable management practices. So we do want to support that. We also want to develop work groups for forestry, because we don't really have like a collaborative group, at least for water quality and basin planning. So we want to start that in the basin. So thanks so much for sticking with me through this. So if you want to get involved, you can contact me. You can contact your Regional Planning Commission. If you know who your local watershed group is, you can contact your conservation district. There's so many different folks that you can contact to get involved. I want to share a story where just recently we did a survey for this plan, like at the beginning of the planning process, that went out to the public, and we ended up getting like 140 responses, which is actually really high for us. Usually we get like 15 or 20. So it was really good, and we were excited about it, and the feedback was actually really helpful. And one of the folks that filled it out had sent me a message and said, I really want to do a river cleanup. My friends and I do a paddle, and we thought, well, why not do this river cleanup? Well, we do this paddle we do every year. And I hadn't really been involved in that before, but I tried to put him in touch with some different people who I know had done that work. And then I was at a city council meeting with the Central Vermont Regional Planning Commission and the Friends of Winooski River, where I live in Berry City. And I did live in the Lamoille Basin for about 13 years before moving to Berry City. And so there's the Stevens Branch flows through the city, and you wouldn't even know it. It's so tucked away and kind of entrenched between industry and roads. And so we were talking about stormwater master planning and river projects, and the mayor said, well, why don't we do a cleanup, like green up, but we'll do it in the fall when the water's low. And I was like, yeah, I'll help with that. And the Winooski Friends of the Winooski said, yeah, we'll do that too. And so we ended up meeting, in September on a cold morning, and only about 4 of us came out. And it was probably a good thing, because we really didn't know like the effort and even the physicality of doing these river cleanups, walking up and down the rivers and picking up large debris and then, trekking them out. And like I said, the river is entrenched, so you had to like climb up very steep areas. So suffice it to say, we learned a lot, and we actually cleaned up a lot that day. And now we're psyched to do it next year and do it good and get a lot of people involved. So I'm saying this because I think everybody can do this type of work. You don't necessarily have to do a strategy in the basin plan or be part of a watershed group. It's something that you can do if you're, passionate about it. So I just recommend that you give it a try. So if you want to submit comments on the plan, so formal comments, these are comments that you would submit, I recommend via online through email or mail. You can also, if you don't have the ability to do that, you can most certainly call my phone number and call me and submit your comment. I won't be addressing formal comments now. I would address it in responsiveness summary. Tonight, if you just have general comments that you want to share, I can do my best to answer them. And if you have any questions, I'll be happy to take those. So if people want to have a break, maybe we'll do 5 minutes. If you need to go to the bathroom, get a drink of water, whatever it is you need to do, and I'll be kind of hanging out here. But in 5 minutes, we can start our question and answer session. Yeah, so I'll see folks back here at 7.
Okay. Is that good? Okay.
All right, so we've had our 5 minutes. I know that's probably not enough for some people. So hopefully folks can trickle back. So let me look at my notes for our comment and answer. All right. So Peter from the Lamoille County Conservation District, you can see Peter there. He's got that nice, I think he's in a skyscraper somewhere. He's got the office behind him. He will be moderating the questions. So if you have a question, please raise your hand and Peter will get to you. We wanted to take questions from people on the phone first. If you're in a satellite meeting, you just provide your question. You could either go up to the moderator and speak into their computer or whatever, if there's a mic there, or you can give that question to the moderator and they can read it back to me, whatever works for you. So I want to open it up to the folks on the phone first.
Hi.
Hi there.
Hi. Stu Arnold, Caspian Lake.
Hi, Stu.
I just got one little added comment on your wastewater section. Besides the stewards of the watershed that are studying the Caspian Lake water quality and tributaries and the watershed plan, we also have a wastewater committee in town that is reviewing and actively studying watershed plans for the village of Greensboro, which would include the southern end of Caspian Lake. And I thought that might be something to add to your wastewater section, that there's action and activity in that region.
Definitely, Stu. Thank you for letting me know. I didn't know that.
Dan Predpaul is the leader on that. I can get you more information later.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, thank you. Anybody else on the phone have a question or a comment? And remember, if you have a formal comment, just make sure you let me know before you say it. All right, anybody in any of the satellite meetings have any questions or comments? Oh, come on, I didn't cover everything, did I? And I know the plan's only been out for a day, so I'm sure things will pop up. And remember, you can always reach out to me at any time. All right, so Hyde Park room, questions? Yeah, actually, if you want to come up, that'd be great. So you can speak into the mic area, and then I can answer.
I'm my face on camera too. Well, I was just wondering. I'm writing an article for the Hardwick Gazette about the watershed, and I mostly want to cover what's happened in the last 5 years. So there were 4 areas that were designated as was it endangered or impaired? What was the correct terminology?
I think probably, well, I don't know if there are 4 areas, but there are areas that are designated as impaired and stressed.
Okay. So have there been any significant changes, new impaired areas that we're aware of, and successes in rejuvenating, I guess, the previously impaired since 2016?
Yeah, so one instance of one of the newer impairments that happened last year is Stones Brook, and that's in Fairfax. And so that's one of the ones that we're now monitoring to get a better idea of what's going on there. And the reason why it's not passing is because they assess the aquatic biota, so they look at the macroinvertebrates in the fish. And they weren't meeting the criteria to pass our water quality standards. And so now we're partnering up with the Franklin County Conservation District to figure out what's going on there and seeing if we can maybe work with the folks in the watershed, if we can identify what some of the issues may be, to help fix that issue. So right now we're just trying to figure out what's causing it. In terms of waters that were, so there was Elmore Branch was a stressed water that was recently taken off the stressed waters list. And I think we have a number of other waters that will be probably taken off that list as well. And mostly the reason why those are being taken off the list has to do with a number, like a combination of time, because some of these were put on the list because of flooding and historic land use. And so like floods happened and people basically, were gravel mining in the rivers and, trying to stabilize the riverbanks. And so it caused a lot of problems within the river. But then over time, the rivers have kind of reset themselves and then some of those areas have been fixed. And so that's one of the reasons why those are being taken off the list. And that's why Elmore was taken off the list. Another one is Rodman Brook, and that's been kind of up and down for a little while. It's on Garfield Road in Morrisville, and there's a cap landfill there. And they had some trouble with a part of the cap or the treatment area failing, and it was putting a lot of metals and iron into the river that was causing problems, but they fixed that, and so that's starting to look much better. So that's another water. So those are some
Great.
examples.
Okay. Next question. Vermont has had a long history of, like you said, land use, gravel mining. Hardwick is famous for its granite. But then at the same time, with modernity and technology, it's no longer horses and buggies running around. We have cars and roads, and there's always going to be more and more cars and more roads. So would you say, just generally, and maybe this is something that's a little bit too wide of a scope, and maybe it's something that we don't have enough information to really answer, but would you say that water quality overall in Vermont has been improving or getting worse as time goes on?
So I would say overall it's been improving. So I think Ethan, who's here with us tonight, he was there, I think, when they were doing some of the first water quality plans. And those original plans were really about this point pollution source. So it's basically end of pipe pollution. So it could be coming, you talk to an old timer and they talk about how the rivers used to run white, from the creamery, or like in the town I grew up, they would run brown from the tannery. So because a lot of those point discharges now are they've gotten rid of them, or now they're permitted. We have the wastewater treatment facilities. So putting those facilities in has caused a lot of improvement in waters. And because we live in a place that isn't so extremely developed, we've really been able to rebound, I think. And now that we're becoming even more, I think, aware and understanding of how to work better with our water resources, I kind of feel like we're going to keep moving in the right direction. I think we also, because of some regulations we have, they also help protect water quality, like regulations where you can't build in wetlands, or if you're putting in impervious surfaces that you have to treat that water. But I think there's still far to go. And it would be nice if we can make those things affordable for people and make those things that people want to do. So I think there's still a lot we can do, but I think we've just been on an upward trend.
Great. Let's see. So I noticed when I was going through the report right before I came here that according to the biota and the fisheries examinations, I'm not sure if fisheries is the right word, but there was it generally seemed that the east of the Lamoille River basin was pretty clean. The lower headwaters of the Lamoille River have, I think, 5 samples in them, and all of them are very good or above, which isn't repeated anywhere else in the Lamoille River Valley. But of course, it's also starting in the Greensboro area. So how much of that aquatic diversity of the ecosystems and quality we see there, how much of that is land use and practices being ongoing in that area, and how much of it is just them being upstream?
Yeah. In terms of the good water quality, you mean?
Mhm.
Yeah, so I think in general, there's less developed area. It's also a little less flat. So the further you get down in the basin, the more flat. And so the more you have rivers that are much like slow winding, they have much more access to like farm fields and like historical impacts. Just more development in general, potentially more roads. It could also be an issue of where they're doing the monitoring as well. So something to know about our monitoring is that we identify sites, so there's probabilistic sampling, which if they were to do that in the watershed and then they compared the different sides, they might be able to say, well, this side of the watershed's in better shape than that side of the watershed because they did it randomly. But because we actually pick sites for them to monitor, it may not just be representing it well, and it was also the past 5 years. But I think in general, you will find, where we have the interstate connection to the interstate, we have more development, and in that case, we have some more water quality issues in those areas.
Okay. Let's see, do I have any other lovely questions? Have there been any situations in the past 5 years where we set out to do a program thinking that it'll work or solve a problem, and then it turns out to be more of a lesson learned? And if so, what sorts of stories, what sorts of things have we seen there, if anything?
I know. Well, and I've only been doing this for 5 years or so, 5 or 6 years. So I'm just trying to think of like, there is a project that I don't know if it's a lesson learned more than like geez, you just have this area that's really dynamic and it's really hard to do things there. It's like a project that Peter and I worked on with Stacy in the town of Wolcott, where there was a flood chute coming off of the Wild Branch. And we were trying to stabilize it, so we weren't getting a lot of erosion and sediment. We worked with B-Trans, and were able to, like, instead of them just having just rock along the bank, we were able to take dirt from the other side that was eroding and put it on that bank and plant. But it just keeps flooding, going through the flood chute and still expanding. So it's like, recognizing you're working in these dynamic systems and there's only so much that we can do, that sometimes they just need space and they're gonna erode and they're gonna have to move. Ethan, do you have any really good stories about about that by any chance?
I echo what you just said, Danielle. That was a good. I agree with your response.
Yeah, and I'm sure there have been things that you kind of go and you're like, I think this is what the issue is. And then you do a lot of work and you're still not getting it. And I think that that's been really hard in the areas that are most developed, is because of the impact of such heavy development. It's been really hard to fix those streams, even though they've been working really hard on them for a long time.
Hey, Danielle, there is a comment or a question in the comments from Kent Henderson.
Ooh, that's a good question, Kent. So he said, how would you predict that ARPA funds will be used during this Basin 7 5-year plan? Well, I feel like I need to know more about the timeline for that funding, because one of the things that I think it would be used for would be for the towns that are looking at the wastewater and village septic, because that seems like that's one of the big places where the funding will go to. So those towns that want to invest in doing that work, I think probably some of those ARPA funds will be spent there. I don't know. It'd be interesting to hear from the regional planning commissions, how towns are choosing to spend their ARPA funding, and if anything that they're choosing to spend it on is water quality based, because I haven't heard anything about that. And then also, Kent, there is a program where they'll be looking at mobile home parks, I think, throughout the state. So, and in the Lake Champlain Basin. So that would include Basin 7 as well, and looking at those areas and seeing if they need, upgrades or things to make them more up to speed with their septic. Do you have
Yeah,
anything to say?
Yeah, it's a good question. And yeah, the majority, I think, of the ask is around municipal water and sewer infrastructure. So I think you're right, looking at stormwater retrofit projects, village wastewater pretreatment type of projects. And I don't think you have any combined sewer overflow, like abatement projects in the watershed, Danielle, but the other thing would be towards anything having to do with dam safety and infrastructure improvements. And of course, we do have a grant around removing old dams that are no longer functional and don't really serve any other public safety or public purpose. And then as you said, funding around healthy homes and helping to meet the requirements that mobile home parks need to have for hazard mitigation. And I'll stop there.
Yeah, I don't know if any of the regional planning commissions have any feedback on that.
Danielle, Dean here.
Hi, Dean.
Yeah, I would just address it briefly by saying that first, I'm not the point person for ARPA. Second, the advice that we're giving communities is to take it slow. You've mentioned not knowing the timeline. I believe it's December of 2026. So there's quite a bit of time that communities have to spend the money. So the advice is take it slow, really truly figure out what your needs are. Communities are creating committees. Some of them are planning to go to the town meeting to hear from people and perhaps make proposals. I'd be happy to connect with you, Kent. I was actually just about to send you an email saying we could talk about it a little bit more. I guess I'll just leave it at that.
Could I interject that our water base or our watershed group had a strategic planning meeting just yesterday, and this is a big concern, is that we know there's going to be a big influx of money for 3 years, and we are just highly concerned whether there are enough shovel-ready projects ready to go to really utilize this money properly, just the way that the process works, where you do the assessment, the 30% design, and then finally you get to actual design and implementation. So we're concerned that we can get up to speed fast enough to use this big flood of money and don't miss some great opportunities.
Yeah, Danielle, we've talked a little bit about it, and I would second what Dean say. Time to do some planning. I won't say ironically, but it can be a challenge for the smaller towns to try to figure out how to spend their allocation. In Chittenden County, you got Burlington, South Burlington, they got stormwater projects, plenty of them to do because so many impaired streams, or wastewater or other type projects. But the smaller towns, I don't know if Catherine, you want to say anything about that, but we had this whole discussion with the Jericho Select Board about just capital planning. So, yeah.
Yeah, I would just add that, as you all know, Dan and Catherine and other folks, we have this ongoing, process to identify high priority municipal infrastructure improvement projects through the intended use plan and through the state revolving loan fund. And so we do have a lot of projects out there that do have preliminary engineering reports, and at least they're in the hopper, so that we know that that there's a lot of projects that have been identified, and we'll continue to move forward. That we know are high priority projects, and that's not my program, so I'll stop there.
Yeah, Ryan, did you have your hand raised? I think it was raised earlier, Ryan McCall.
I did, and I put it down because I thought it was marginally covered with the conversation. But yeah, their towns are using their money for the ARPA money for a ton of things. But one of the things I've heard is for dam removal. They're looking, maybe not necessarily for the actual physical process of the dam removal, but spreading it out towards economic development and the design process. Been sitting on a couple of different boards locally here down near Montpelier and Vermont River Conservancy, and it's definitely it's come up. So as a group, you guys can be looking for those kinds of resources that way.
Thanks. Do we have any other questions or comments people want to share?
I have a brief one, sort of a comment, and I'll do something more formal inside of Chittenden County RPC staff comments. But the plan does talk about the MS4 communities, and we do have two in the basin, Milton and Essex, and it does talk about some of that. But one missing element, perhaps, that all might need addressing, just to have a discrete header. The two paragraphs would be the phosphorus control plans. So Milton does not have an impaired stream, any at all. Essex does, but it's not part of the Lamoille Basin, but they still have an overall, both the MS4 towns, Milton and Essex, do have phosphorus control plans and have identified a suite of projects that they plan to do over the next 20-some years. So it might be worth a reference, but and then the take-home message to the rest of the municipalities in the Lamoille Basin is, don't let your streams become impaired, because then you'll be designated as an MS4, a municipal separate storm sewer system permittee, and you'll have even more work to do.
You don't want to have to do more work. We're all so busy. Thanks, Dan, for that. And I'll check the plan and talk to you about it.
Yeah, Danielle, I can just mention that, even though we just have Woodbury in this basin, we are working with our communities a lot and trying to help them figure out how they're going to spend their ARPA funds. And a lot of those projects in the Winooski Basin are going to go, they're going to be water quality related. And specifically, I know of Northfield is going to try to do their CSO project using ARPA funds. So I know that's out there. And Grace Vinson, who has been involved in water quality work, she's dealing with the ARPA funds at our office if you have questions.
Okay, that's good to know. That'll be something good for us to keep in touch with over time and check in about for sure. All right, folks, what do you say? Any other questions or comments? And like I said, if anything comes up, just give me a call, shoot me an email, whatever works for you. And you can submit your formal comments via email. I think it's, let me make sure I have it right.
I put it up in the comments.
I do, thank you.
And our Basin 7 comments.
At
Gov.
Perfect. All right, everybody. Well, thank you so much for taking the time tonight and to listen in. And I'm just really excited that you all made it out tonight. And I'll be looking forward to hearing from the satellite meetings to find out who had the most people. I'll bring some donuts for you.
I definitely lose. All of mine are remote, but that's okay. We had people attend through my quack. Dan gets the donuts, I think.
All right. Thank you, everybody.
That was a fantastic
Thank you so
presentation.
very much.
Danielle.
Appreciate
Thanks so
it.
much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a good night. Be safe.
Right.